Okay, Tom. So just yeah, just next to me, and I'll skip you through.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm very pro no code, and I'll tell you why. So I've done a lot in my entrepreneurial career. I used to run a sportswear business. Then I worked in I was an accountant before that. And then I worked in a VC consultancy. So I saw everything. I saw operations, I saw finance. And then when I was working in the VC consultancy, I saw how these tech products were built, and we did loads of consultations on how to get to product market fit. So I learned all of that, and I thought, right, it's time to learn to code so I could build them myself. So I took 2 days, started to learn the code, and then within that, I found out what no code was. And that was it, game over. I wasn't learning to code anymore. I was going to learn to no code. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you should be designing this thing to hand out to people, and then you want to scale it and grow it through sales, and then bring on a tech team later. So you don't want to learn to code to build the thing. You want to be the CEO, the entrepreneur guiding it. You don't want to be the tech guy. So I went straight to no code instead of code. So that's sort of why I got into this no code thing. Next slide, Richard. Oh, on it. Oh, we're on it. Can you just let me know if we're on it as well?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we're on.
Yeah, so about me, 7 years founding businesses, partner here at NOCODE, MOHARA, doing no code, and I've been building no code solutions for years for myself and for clients. Before that, I was a venture builder, and then got into no code for the reasons that I just said. Next slide.
Content.
So this is the few things I'm going to go over. An introduction, then I'm going to go over what no code is, no code versus code, the big issue, and then no code's brand issue, because it's got a little bit of one. The top platforms that you should know about, no code for validation. Then we're going to go over the 3 parts of no code you need to know if you want to become a no coder, and then an example. So it's pretty comprehensive. Next slide.
Introduction.
So no code basically refers to a series of tools that give users the ability to build digital products without the need for code. Now, no code isn't great just because it replaces the need to write code. It's great because it's an incredibly efficient way to create products fast. Yes, we love the tools, but what we really love is the outcome that it provides. No code's basically a shortcut to developing tech products. Since the dawn of technology, products have traditionally been coded by developers who sit down and they write every single aspect of the code. So if you take a web app or a website, for example, they will have literally coded the header, the footer, the page margins, the buttons. Literally every single thing was written in hard code. But now there's a new way to do things, which is no code. And no code is just that. It's building things that previously would have used code just without the need for code. And it's a concept that allows individuals and organizations to build these products in record speeds. And the way they do it is taking pre-made blocks of code and then organize them together using a rigid set of guidelines that's been set out by these no-code platforms, which would be input fields and actions. So it would say, you know, what do you want to put in this bit? What do you want to put in the next bit? Structured. Shopify is a great example. They'll only let you build in sliders, so you can't really go wrong. And it makes it look nice at the end of the day. And to be honest, all no code is just an advancement in a long line of advancements. You know, the loom, when that came out, everyone was panicking about how it was going to destroy the weaving industry. But at the end of the day, it just increased productivity, and then costs were lowered. Next slide. So basically, no code is just a progression of software development where we use automation to create code that previously would have needed to be written. Now, the code still exists. The code's just behind the scenes. What no code is this visual development process enabling users to drag and drop pre-built components and then connect them together to make a functioning application or a workflow. So when we talk about no code, it's not just applications. It could be streams of like workflows, so emails to Stripe integrations, or a database like Airtable. Now, this has been happening for a while. For example, websites started out in HTML, and then they moved to GeoCities, and then we moved to WordPress, and then we moved to Webflow. And each one used less and less code as it went. HTML sites were just pure code. You have to write every single thing. GeoCities was still code, but then you had a handful of templates, but you could customize. And then we got WordPress that came along, and it allowed you to build in both code and no code. And now we're on Webflow, which is basically no code. No code is needed. You can add code in, but it's not really needed. So as we go through each step, it's less and less code in each step. And less code means less labor, and less labor means less cost. It's pretty much as simple as that. Do you want to spend 100K on an MVP build, or do you want to spend 10? No code is cheaper because it's just less labor intensive. Next slide.
Okay.
So this looks complicated, but it's not. This is code versus no code. So this is an image taken from Flutterflow, which is one of the best apps, in my opinion, for making mobile apps. You've got code on the left, and then you've got no code on the right. And it's pretty clear which one you want to build in. The one on the right is just so much easier. The one on the left looks like it's the matrix, which is the hard code. And the one on the right is just no code. So if you were building on no code, looking at the one on the right, you have all these boxes, and you would just drag it, click on it, drag it, move it down. And then what you'll be doing on the back end in the code, it would just be moving those blocks around for you. So you're still editing it, you're still editing the code, it's just you're not going into that code. If you drag it and move it down, you're just taking a block of code, moving it down. If you change the padding or a button, you're just changing that in the pre-made format in the no-code platform. One is just so much easier. There's no point learning to code when you can do this sort of thing. So in its simplest form, it's just a set of tools where you can build a product where the code has already been written, and you're basically knitting those blocks together. Next slide. But no code seems to have a bit of a brand issue. So a lot of people, for some reason, seem to think that no code is this knockoff variety of code, which literally makes no sense because, yeah, you can get code that's written poorly. But when you think about it, how are these companies, these no-code companies that exist purely to create these tools, they have a lot of teams within them making sure these things are incredibly robust. So something that comes up often is security. People say that no-code platforms aren't as secure. But within these no-code platforms, within these companies, they have teams that are dedicated to security. So those teams aren't sat around doing nothing. They're making sure that thing is airtight. So if you would develop a product yourself, you'd have to go in and write all the security yourself. Or if you went to an agency, you have to trust that they're doing it right as well. I think a good way to think about a no-code platform is if you're renting an office in a major building. They look after the security, they look after the building's upkeep, and you're just renting it. You're just renting the office. So you're benefiting from all their resources. Next slide. So when it comes to no-code platforms, there are so many of them. There's one popping up every day in each niche. In finance, for example, you'd have one a week popping up to do these specific little things. But there are these major platforms that you should know about, and they can cover most use cases. And the reason that I've chose these ones is based on revenue, investment, users, staff, most developers, biggest support network. So through those criteria, these are ranked really highly. So that's why I've gone for them. The three I'm going to talk about is Flutterflow, Bubble, and Make. So Flutterflow is for mobile apps. It uses a language Flutter, and you can export that at the end. So all you're doing, and that was the example I showed you in the previous image, you're just dragging and dropping these components, and it builds the code behind the scenes. You don't have to write the code, you don't have to touch the code. You can if you want to, but you can export it at the end, and then it creates the app. And then we've got Bubble. So Bubble is the top no-code tool right now. It's also the oldest. It's been around for 12 years. And I assume that most of us have heard of it before. It's definitely the most well-known. It's very visual. It's very drag and drop. The workflows are easy to understand, and it has its own database built in. So it's a really, really good place to start. And it's ideal for making MVPs. I've been around the entrepreneurial world for a while, and I would say that 70% of the startups that I've seen through VC, through accelerators I've done, and just on the market on LinkedIn, everything, 70% of these could have been trialed in Bubble, because Bubble is great for like web-based SaaS apps. And also, if you're going to make a mobile app, you can still use Bubble, just do it in a responsive manner and squeeze it down to a phone, because even for an MVP, that is good enough. And then the final one to talk about is Make, what was formerly known as Integram app, which is just a way to line up automation. So, you get an email, it's send a questionnaire, that goes to Stripe, and then it would link back to another website, for example. It's just a way to line up automations, and that's incredibly useful in businesses. So next slide. So no code for validation is leading on from what Rich was talking about. So no code platforms are ideal for validation because you can make these prototypes that are functional in weeks instead of months. And by using a no code platform, you can quickly test a hypothesis, and the go-to-market is in weeks, not months. And as I said before, less code, less labor, less cost, quicker to market. Another amazing thing about these is you can just iterate so quickly. So for example, I was working with a client a few weeks ago, they wanted a button moved. The button wasn't getting clicked enough. They wanted it moved. So I just clicked it and dragged it up. It was as simple as that. And then the conversions increased just because of where the button was. Whereas in code, that might have taken a lot longer. And if you think about it, traditionally, like pre-seed rounds, when you go through investment, are used to fund MVPs and then find product market fit. So if you were you'd be giving away 10% for 100K, for example, you then go and spend that on the MVP, or you could build a no-code solution, build a waiting list, get traction. I mean, I've seen a lot of people get initial revenue through these MVPs as well. And then you can go to an investor with a much better offer to get a higher number. You also have a proven product on the market. You know that this thing might go somewhere. It's a no-brainer. So yeah, that's why I'm so pro no-code. Next slide. All right, so what goes on behind the scenes in no-code? When you want to build something in no-code, there are three main things you need to know. It's the design, it's the workflows, and it's a database. There are tools that use them all, and there are some that use just one. And you can figure these out when you're on your way. And if you look at this, you're thinking, why not just use Bubble for everything? It's a good point. But then if you, like in the example Rich gave, it's just a Wix site and then a type form. If you're, if what you're making is some sort of legal document, you would say, well, instead of creating this whole web app through Bubble, you'd just make a landing page and integrate it to a type form so much quicker. You could do it on Bubble, but it would just be a lot harder. So there are simpler ways to do things. Next slide. So when you're building on no code, design is key. It doesn't need to be something amazing that's going to win an award. It means it just needs to not be embarrassing. The customer needs to use it and not hate using it. Things need to form together well. It needs to be coherent. And that's all the design you need to do. And luckily, if you've been using the internet for the past 10 years, which most of us have, we know what a decent web page looks like. So it's fine. You just need to work out how to put it together. And next slide. If you're building something that is a web app or an app, you need to understand how a database goes together. So if you're building something beyond a series of automations or a design for like an information page that would just lead to a contact form, you don't need to know this stuff. But if you're building something that goes beyond that, you need to know how to use a database, which stores all of the information. If we're taking like Facebook, for example, the data types would be users, posts, messages, images, all that sort of thing. And then within each user, you'd have name, age, and so on. And within posts, you'd have post time. And all of this data is saved and then played back. So it's always good if you're starting with these web apps to really sort out the database, because you don't want to have to go back in at the end and change these things. Next. And then finally, we have workflows. So workflows tie everything together. This is the difference between a website that just sits and looks pretty and a website that actually interacts with a database underneath. It's like a difference between a landing page and a web app, like I say Facebook again or LinkedIn. So these workflows are the behind the scenes steps that are executed once something has been actioned. And it can be as simple as clicking a button to upload an image or signing in, or it can be as complex as click a button to send out data to an API, which then goes to the database, then manipulates that data, then sends it back. It can get complicated. So if we're looking at this one for an example, if we think of a sign-in form or a login form, you put in your details, the login button is clicked. When the login button is clicked, the logic flow goes to, does the username match the password? If yes, great, log the user in and then go to the profile page. If no, show message that says incorrect password. And then throughout all the pages, you'd have to structure these things. When you're building these things, you need to think of everything. So if I was to click the login button, put the username in, it logs it in, it would just go back to the main page. Instead, you want to put all the information in, for example, and then it would end on the profile page. Right, next slide. So here's an example. So this is Sportscal. This is a sports calendar that I made about 3 months ago, where you would go on and you just download a sports team's calendar. It's as simple as that. So the time between idea to launch was a month and the build time was 3 weeks. And it could have been quicker. It was a back and forth between America. It took revenue on its first day, and now it makes around $100 a month. And that's for myself and for the dude I'm working with out in the US. Next slide. So these are the steps that I went through to make Sportscal. The first thing, and with every product and service that is made, you need to understand whether a customer wants it. So I went out, I found some potential customers who like sports, got talking to them and asked them questions about how they got their sports calendars at the moment. And we interviewed around 20 of them. 15 people said they liked it and 5 people said they'd buy it. That was good enough for us. We were then thought, right, that's it, let's do it. So I had to think about what people wanted and then put together some rough imagery. And this was just on Canva just so I could show this back to the users and say, is this what you want? Sign up, search for a sports team, click download, pay, get download. It was as simple as that. So they looked at this, they said it was okay. And then we said, awesome, how much are you going to pay for this? And then out of all the answers, it sort of averaged to $5 for a calendar, one off, and then 20 for unlimited calendars for the year, which we thought was crazy. We're like, who's going to pay that? But they wanted to, so that's what we put it at. Now, in this, we never told them what we wanted. We just asked them what they wanted, and then we built what they wanted. So if there's a takeaway to take away from this presentation, it's don't make what you think customers want, make what they actually want. So next slide. So I then translated this to a product. So when you do enough no code, you can basically template everything. So I just took a few templates, which was the landing page, the onboarding page, and I added some billing in. And then I created some other page, the other page, which was the main page for this, which was the filter. So you'd click on the league, for example, and then you'd go through to a second page, which would show all of the teams within that league. So say with the NFL, click on NFL, go to all these teams and their parent would be the NFL logo. So then we would see all of these teams and then we'd click on it and then it downloads it. And then if they'd have to sign up as well. So when they sign up within their user profile, it would say, these guys have subscribed, therefore they can download it. That was probably a bit complex, but it is when you get into this and you've learned design, you've learned workflows, you've learned databases, these things are quite simple to build. So next slide. So in summary, no code's an advancement and a long line of advancements. No code is still code. It's just the code is hidden behind the scenes. A lot of platforms that you should know about, but there are only a few key ones that you need to know. No code is ideal for ideal validation. And if you want to become a no coder, there are 3 main things you need to learn: design, database, workflows, and finally go on Sportscal and subscribe to the most expensive plan. So next slide. So yeah, things to remember, the 2 main takeaways. No code is the organization of pre-made blocks of code that can be structured visually. And also don't make what you think customers want. Actually speak to them, validate the ideas, and make what they want. So that's me. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Thomas Noble, 1992. I'm writing about no code pretty much every day. I write a weekly newsletter on it, and just have a go and build something in no code and let me know how it goes. The best place to start, I would say, is Bubble. Bubble is, if you can learn Bubble, it's very easy to learn the rest of them. And just have a little product in mind and just go off and build that. Go on YouTube, you can find so many things that will tell you, that will give you step-by-step walkthroughs of how to build. And if you get stuck, you can always go off to a professional and you pay about £50 an hour. This is what I did a long time ago. And they'll just show you the hard parts, but it's all on YouTube. And the Bubble community is so good, you can ask them anything. And someone's asked a question before. So there's always an answer. There's always a way to find these things out. So yeah, let me know how it goes. So that's me done. That's no code.
Super, thanks, Tom.
Yeah, Rich.
We've got 3 chats. I'm not sure whether they're questions.
Let's have a look.
Yeah, maybe we'll stop the screen share now. We can go back.
I just want, yeah,
I'll go through these questions. So the best one for mobile apps, in my opinion, is Flutterflow, because Flutter allows you to then go on to make that app, to export the app to Android and Apple. And when you look into it, people say that Flutterflow requires code. I've not touched a line of code yet, and I've almost finished an app for a client. So it's very user friendly. So Flutterflow is the way to go for that.
Tom, what about Marvel? Are you familiar with the Marvel, or is it a little outdated now?
I've not heard of that one, no. There
Yeah,
are a lot
Marvel's
of
like,
platforms out there.
yeah, Marvel's effectively, it's like a clickable prototype. It's been superseded by Figma, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
Figma's, yeah,
Oh,
because
Figma.
Marvel used to be able to ingest, you'd ingest designs and you'd be able to create a clickable prototype, but Figma's kind of superseded it a bit in the last couple of years.
Oh, and so Figma was acquired by Adobe, wasn't it, recently?
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen to that in the future? But yeah, it was.
Yeah. Great. And what was the next one?
This question: what are the level of bugs or changes to be made in no code? There aren't too many bugs because they won't let it. You can't make it if there are bugs. So on Flutterflow, for example, if you're running into issues, it just won't let you do it, and you need to think around it. But there are people behind the scenes writing this code, so there are very few bugs. You rarely run into issues. They have these huge teams making sure these things run smoothly, and they usually do. I've never come across an issue where there's been a problem. If there's ever a problem in Bubble, for example, I know that I'm the problem because they will have fixed this thing. So it's just a case of figuring it out and working around. So there really aren't too many bugs that I've come across, if that answers the question.
And
That is a yes.
That's a yes, Tom. Thanks so
that's
much.
a yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. How scalable are these platforms? So my answer is always no code platforms are great up to a point. So if you had, for example, 100,000 entries in a database, it's going to start to slow down. If you get up to 1 million, it's going to start to slow down. But then I always say, if you've got 1 million entries in your database, I think you've proven the concept. You're doing very well.
Yeah.
So you can then take that on, get investment to go onto an in-house solution. So
yeah.
if you're struggling with scale, that's a good thing. And who takes ownership? So in Bubble, for example, Bubble, you can't export the code. They don't technically, it's hosted on theirs. They don't own the IP, but on Flutterflow, you can export the code. But when you go to an outside agency, you can give them this template. So then they have something better, something to just go off there. So in terms of scalability, yeah, there are issues, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing when these things start to break.
What about the data there, Tom? So let's imagine we go and get 100 users on a POC, and that's enough to prove that we want to go and build out an MVP. Those users need to be ported across. So Bubble, they allow you to extract the data?
You can export the data whenever you want. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the key thing. I think because when you, and the slide I've got at the minute kind of shows the progression of what you could be going through. So the POC, proof of concept, it is for that reason only. It is not going to be, well, in some cases it could be like years worth of solution, depends on where you are. But in the main, they are POCs to be built to be run for 3 to 6 months to really validate exactly what you've got. If they start to creak, if they start to not really be fit for purpose, that's when you can start to look at the rebuild and the MVP. And the MVP is essentially foundational code, which you then can scale on to be significant. But we have seen, no code POCs go and be tremendously successful. I mean, you may have heard of Gymshark. I mean, they were worth billions. Shopify.
Yeah.
That's all it was, Shopify and Stripe. That's all they were, great marketing.
Also, if you were to start a business, so say you start a business in a business marketplace, let's say, you would be doing very, very well if you had 2,000 businesses on there. So that's 2,000 entries in the database. That's a very low volume, but that could still exist on a no-code tool almost forever.
Totally.
So it depends upon what it is.
Yeah, and the feature set of where you want to take it, because we found that we did a no-code POC, very lightweight for a Diageo venture, so Diageo internal venture, and Michelle, who was the founder, was on that for 6 to 8 months until the no-code tooling just didn't give her the flexibility to be able to do it. So she raised capital out of Diageo, and then we started an MVP plus kind of build, and that's when we took over, as MOHARA Ventures, which is after 0 to 1, and built it out from there. So it really comes like, keep it going as long as it can until you definitely need to go and move it, because the more customers you get, the more attractive you're going to be to either acquirers or investors. The higher your valuation, the less dilution you've got, the less capital you spent. Get as far down that value chain as possible, so you can raise that capital at the highest valuation possible, and you're diluting less, you get potentially more capital, you've proven your model, you've done all the things without spending too much time and too much money.
Yeah, and on the data ownership, just because Bubble has its own database built in, you can still use it. You can still plug in an external database and then continue that database on to whatever you choose to do next.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's
that's
not,
an
the data is
interesting.
not stuck in Bubble.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I mean, that's where you may need to talk to an engineering team. But what Tom's essentially saying there is Bubble could be the front end, and then
Yeah.
Bubble allows you to integrate a much more scalable, bespoke database solution. If Bubble's internal database is not working, then that could be the hybrid solution that gets you all the way you need to get to. And then you may have issues around acquisition and IP and things like that. But if you're in that situation, it's a brilliant problem.
You're well when you're getting acquisition offers, you're probably well beyond MVP. I think you've done quite well there.
Yeah, I just, if I can, I just want to just take a moment just to show you this sheet, because this is how we work, and I think it's important to recognize that kind of journey that you're at. So what we've been talking about on the validation piece, that's obviously the Who's Fabio work. We call that MOHARA Traction Accelerator. So that will be coming out soon, but it essentially follows that recipe. Tom's area is the piloting more side of the 0 to 1, and then post that stage, we invest in early stage businesses and build them. So we do the engineering side as well. So once you post that POC, is to do it. And we've been working this model for quite some time in different guises, and it is a really effective way to do it. Now, whether you end up doing the MBS stuff with your own internal team, so the venture studio full build with an internal team or another company, this process, it works. Look at the accelerator, the validation piece, look at the piloting, no code. Then once you've exhausted no code or it needs to grow, find a team that is aligned that you can build with, be that internal, be that like a MOHARA company or someone else, and go and grow and build that afterwards. Follow that process. It's proven and it does work. And that's just why I wanted to kind of show the structure of how we work, because it's designed this way after years of being in the game, because it does work this way. And it's about gateways. Validate gateway, pilot gateway, then you're at scale and you go.
Cool. Another question: how well does marrying no code and code work as your business becomes less generic? So on Bubble has its own code behind the scenes that you can't really touch, so not too well. However, it is possible to plug in APIs. So anything that you can't do on the platform, you can potentially do through an API. And then when you come to things like Flutterflow, it's your coding behind the scenes, and you can actually build custom widgets to go in it. So it depends upon the platform, really. To answer your question. Yeah, and if anyone's got any business ideas they want to write in the chat, I'll have a go at trying to, on the spot, tell you how you could no code it.
Richard, will you put that link on a chat as well, please? What did you call your
yeah, did you want me to
what I'll do anyway, if you can share the slides, I'll put it on our LMS.
Okay, yeah, I'll share the slides because I probably need to just open these up.
Yeah,
yeah, I'll share the slide. I will make sure you've got PDFs of both and they've got the embedded links in them.
Oh, great, thank you. In terms of so when you touched on that point about no code and then the scalability piece, I thought it was really the no code piece was ultimately the throwaway piece. You get to MVP, you establish the proof, and then you go off, and by which time you'll have the money and the people to build it yourself. But then you said about you gave an example of how somebody built something and literally worth billions, built purely on no code. Same time you said it was Shopify and Stripe. So would you
Stripe, yeah.
Shopify a no code platform? As for me, it's a platform as opposed to a no code platform. Just some clarification.
Sure. So Gymshark, the example that we use is e-commerce. So they're basically e-commerce and logistics for how they get their goods delivered. So they had a Shopify website for users to be able to transact, and that's going to send an order to their logistics software, which is bought off the shelf, and it's just connected via API. And the logistics software informs the warehouse and all their tooling down there to go and get it delivered. it's so proven. E-commerce has been around since, you know, the mid 90s, and those tools are so evolved. That's why that one can live and breathe in that way. Certain more bespoke ones, like the logistics one from so the event logistics from Diageo, it reached its end within 3 to 6 months because the functionality that was needed for that use case was too bespoke. And it became that the no-code tooling that we had was actually restrictive. So I think the mindset should be, it is a POC. That's how it should be viewed, right? Because you can't, in the main, you can't build extensive, scalable, you know, enterprise software around it in the main, depending on your use case. So I would view it as a POC, but I think the key message is that bring it along as far as you can before you have to spend on the bespoke work, on the scalable, you know, raw code, because it gets your valuation up. Your valuation goes up, you're able to get better capital at better preference. So I think as long as the POC can live and breathe and it's functional, even if it's got a little bit of manual operation in there, you need to weigh up how much that manual operation costs to whether you need to spend 60, 70,000 pounds on a bit of bespoke tooling. So I think you just get going with the POC, move forward on its journey. You'll soon realize the gaps, you'll soon realize the restrictions, and then you make a decision at that point. Okay, I might need to go and build something bespoke. I've raised capital for it. Or you might say, do you know what? I can suffer that a bit. I can get a person to run that element of the operations. And that's not going to be as painful as, you know, rebuilding or restarting, you know, the MVP scalable. One thing it is worth saying from an investor perspective, they will want to know the plan for your technology. You know, so if you say that you are going to be on this pilot software for a long time, and that's where you believe you're going to be, you've got to have a case for that, you know, because they want to know a roadmap of where the evolution is going to go of the business. So I think for POCs, yeah, it is a POC. Ultimately, you probably will not move forward with it long term, but it can get you so far now. And I think that's the key, is like making it efficient, making it cost effective to get you as far as you can into your journey before you need to do the building bespoke. And that's coming from someone that builds bespoke. You know, we invest in startups to build bespoke work. And I'm saying stay in that POC pace until you need to move, because that's the way to drive value in the company.
I get it.
Yeah.
So the reason I first invited you to join us, Richard, was just to tell us a little bit about, it wasn't clear to me what the MOHARA offering for IVC, is it just for the IVC winners was, and then, you know, it grew legs, and then we started to look at validate, and then we went and that's fantastic, because that's the sort of content that SP participants would be looking for. But maybe you could also just explain what the MOHARA offer is for INSEAD students.
Okay,
people
sure.
Understand.
So yeah, no problem. So I'll keep this as brief as quick as possible. But we invest in non-technical founders typically. So people who've got sector knowledge, or have got an idea or an ability to go and run a startup business, but not the technical product experience. So the reason, what we've done to date was we've invested in over 30 businesses where we work at cost. So we do not make any profit. We work at cost, so we're completely aligned with the founders that we go into business with. We help the founders raise money, and then we will go into business and go and build a company together. Fractional CTO, full-time engineers, full-time designers, myself, anyone within the organization that is needed, but all working at cost. So there's a great deal of alignment, and we get equity in that. Our thesis is that the value of that equity is going to be far higher than if we were to just do agency work. Plus, we like building businesses. And we really think that there are great opportunities out there with people that haven't been able to build tech companies before, or haven't done it before. One of the first businesses we worked with was a company called Bloom and Wild in the UK. I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but they do a very simple thing of flowers through the post. And Aaron was non-technical. He was out of HBS, out of Harvard Business School, and his business is worth over 750 million. And we were with them for the first year of that, got him out with his MVP. Then we brought in a team internally. So we are, we're a venture studio of sorts. Most of our business is in the MVP place, MVP plus. So where we sit down and work the bespoke piece out. We take equity in those startups. We go and grow that company. But we recognized a year or two ago that with the advancements of the no-code work, we need to get earlier in that chain, and we need to work with them from an accelerator perspective, see the journeys of these founders, help them all the way through, with the eventual goal of being pre-seed all the way through to Series A. So we can work with founders all the way from their idea, take them through the accelerator to validate, take them through the 0 to 1 piloting to be able to test it, invest in them at the venture studio level, and then take them beyond to bring in their own CTOs and everything else. So that's what we do. And the reason why we're talking to INSEAD, obviously Ben went to INSEAD. We've supported the MBA entrepreneurship group for 5 or 6 years. But ultimately, you guys are in one of the best business schools in the world. You're coming up with great ideas. You've got the capability and are being trained to run businesses. We have the capability to do the other side of it. And I think that is a potentially really good link up. And I've mentioned this to Nancy at INSEAD, and this is how I got to meet Ramal, and this is why we're kind of here to help you along your journey. And also maybe there's some opportunities for us to work together and build some companies. We're also talking to Loyal VC, who is an INSEAD alumni venture capital firm, who's invested in over 150 INSEAD businesses that have come out. And the idea is, could we look at any great MBA students that are coming through with great ideas that need the kind of investment model that's MOHARA's got, so they don't need to go and find their own CTO, they don't need to go and find their own product people, and go and build some great companies together. That's the thinking.
So that's great, and hopefully it's clear to everybody. By the way, feel free to ask any questions. So how does it work? Let's say I'm an INSEAD student. Do we just send you an email, Richard, and say, can we work together? And then you talk and then you kind of decide, is this a bet I want to take? Or I'm just trying to understand what's the next, because we have a lot of great concepts right now. Yeah. So for them to understand, at some point in time, they'll be ready, if not ready. And what's the next step?
Sure. So we support the IVC. So if any of these businesses go to the IVC, we do get involved and support there. So there's a communication link up for the top 2 results there. But I'm really interested in talking to anybody that's got great ideas inside of what you're doing with SBE. In terms of stages and how to get involved, it's absolutely a connection, a phone call, talking through. I think going through the validation process, both with what you're teaching and also what we offer with inside of that accelerator, the one that's powered by Who's Fabio is a great place to start. I think then coming to Tom and talking to Tom about how could we do a pilot, how could we actually work that through, and what does a deal look like there. And post that environment, we have an investment committee, and we do 8 to 10 deals a year. And we take a look at the founders. Are we the correct match for that founder? Are they for us? Is the opportunity there? Have we got proof out of accelerating the POC stage that we want to go and invest and build it? So I think let's get conversations going if there's anybody's interested in it, because I think now that we've got the 0 to 1 stage as an offering, and one that could hopefully cultivate some great ideas and nurture the entrepreneurs through that, it's about opening that conversation, seeing how we can support it, keeping an eye on each other and working together and see if there's an opportunity at the end of it.
Great.
Can I answer Ken's question? So Ken says, how do you automate personal finance through open banking? I did something similar to this. It was create a dashboard on Bubble, or if you want it to be a web app, or if it's a mobile app, use Flutterflow. And it's pretty much as simple as just going to Plaid, PLAID, and getting their API, and then they can then go to all the banks and get the information. And then you would just, when you have the data back in your database, to showcase it. As simple as that. In terms of actually making actions, that's a lot harder. And you probably wouldn't want to do that through a no-code solution, but it is possible. The Plaid API would let you do that. So just as simple as Bubble or Flutterflow, integrate with Plaid. That's the way.
Fantastic, thank you.
Just on that, with how we're structured, I mean, we're a fee-based at cost-based business in the venture side of it. So you get great value for what we're capable of doing. With that situation, sometimes there is Sometimes there's need for support, which is what Tom and the team do in the pilot stage. So we're showing you how you can go and learn it to do it yourself. If you need our support to do it, we can do it for you with our experience, and it can be very cost effective to allow you to go and do that, which is what we're building, with inside that pilot phase. But also having access to all of the engineers that we've got. If you do need some bespoke work on open banking, we've got the team that have got the engineers to be able to go and do into that, if in case it needs to be hybrid. So if there's anybody that needs, doesn't fancy learning these tools but wants to use them to get to market quickly, that's the conversation we can have, and I'm sure Tom and the team can support how we can make that happen. But we are definite promoters of, you can do this yourself.